So good evening, everyone. So thank you for tuning in Health Huddle episode 12. So we are talking about GMO foods, the DNA of what you eat. So Advanx Health is a DNA company. That's why we talk about a lot of DNA contents here. So today we talk about DNA related to foods. So today I'm the host. I'm your host, John here, and we have Lester joining us this evening. Lester is currently our intern, and we are also very happy that he can also join us as one of the speaker for this health huddle.
Okay, hi everyone. Good evening, everyone. So this is Lester here. Students of molecular biology, major in molecular biology, and currently a science intern in the Advanx Health company. So it's fantastic to have our co-founder from the Advanx Health to join our Health Huddle sessions today. So basically today, our topic will be on the GMO foods. So this is the main topic of GMO, and also in conjunction with the DNA Day, which was in the 25th of the April. So we will more discuss in the DNA stuff with this GMO will be more related to the public. So GMO, John, yes, can we start now? Maybe.
Yes. Okay, so okay, for the start, please tell us what does GMO stands for.
Okay. In the first slide, you can see the con here. So GMO basically is called as the genetically modified organisms. So GMOs has always been recognized as one of the most controversial area of science. So GMO genetic modifications has been used in many fields, in medical applications, in foods, and also agriculture. Even though the GMOs used in the medical applications like the insulin derived from the bacterial culture, and also the vaccine. Actually, vaccine is a kind of stuff that is utilize the concept of the genetic modifications we use, the mRNA from the COVID-19, the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 virus, and then we take the mRNA and also we incorporate into a viral vector. So this kind of the process is actually a genetic modification process. So this kind of stuff being used in the medical applications is widely acceptable to the public. However, when the GMO, or we say the genetic modifications, comes to the topic of foods and also the agriculture, so it usually hits up a debate or a controversial debate amongst the public. So this is the main topic that we want to discuss here. So GMO basically are the organisms whose genetic material has been precisely modified using a genetic engineering. So the result is it can conferring the desired properties to the GMOs. Okay.
Technically, Lester, what does a genetic modified organism? So let's say so we have a question from the floor, okay, by Jane here. So does genetic modified organisms like genetic modified cows, or even let's say genetic modified trees, for example, I think fruits typically grows from trees. Does it count like milk produced by genetic modified cows as considered as GMO food?
In this context, we actually have to consider whether the ingredients in the milks contain the gene from the source of the GMO. For example, when we take for GMO, for example, a tomato here, when we have a gene that is derived from the bacteria, and then we incorporate into the tomato, and the offspring of the tomato, if the offspring of the tomato contain the gene of the bacteria also, so the tomato will consider as the GMO as well. So
then technically does milk contain DNA information in their proteins? I don't think so, right? Is it possible to have that?
I don't think so. No. I think most of the gene from the bacteria does not incorporate into the genome of the animals. So the milk normally will not contain the heterologous genes, or we say the unknown gene from the source of the others.
So let's say chicken and egg, for example. So it's a GMO chicken. Then what about the egg? The egg also a GMO?
We can say that the result of the egg is become a little chicken. So the little chicken can be also a GMO if the chicken is breed, or we say is reproduced with another chickens, and the other chickens is a native, or we say is non-GMO. So the chicken, the offspring of the chicken, may be a carrier of that gene, the gene that is being incorporated into the GMO chicken. So there's no 100% sure about whether the gene is incorporated into the offspring chicken or not. We have to check on the offspring chicken.
Okay. So we have talked about the definition of GMO, genetically modified organisms. Yes. Then I think the next question would be what is the reason behind genetic modified? And I think you have prepared some of the examples of very common foods that within our daily lives that actually is a GMO product. Yeah, please do share.
Yeah. Here are some of the picture here. So actually, genetic modification is not new. It's not new to the world. Actually, people have been using the genetic modifications in some conventional manner. So in past few decades, a plant breeder or farmers, they're actually using the conventional concept of the genetic modifications. They're crossbreeding the plant. So, for example, when you have a plant that contains a beneficial trait, so they will crossbreeding with the other plant that contains also the beneficial trait. So, by doing so, the following or the subsequent generations, the gene, the beneficial gene, will get more pronounced in the subsequent generations and come to nouns. Then you can see, here is the picture, the example of the corn. So, on the right-hand side, we have a modern corn here. We have a modern corn. It's big, juicy, and soft. You see, when you see on the left-hand side, the left-hand side is the ancestor corn, or we call as a name called 𝗀𝗃. So the corn, the shell of the corn is hard, and it's very hard to break unless you have a hammer to break it out, the corn. So this is the result of conventional crossbreeding farmer use to get a beneficial trait until now. So these kind of the normal things that happen every day in the world. So the genetic modifications, the concept of VGM is not new. It's actually exists before we knew about GMO. So the next example is the banana. So you can see this is the ancestor one, and this is the modern banana. So this banana is the result of the plant breeding, the conventional plant breeding of the farmers that result in this kind of banana that we usually eat. So the next one is the eggplant here. So the color also changes. So this is the ancestor one, and this is the modern plant that we eat. So when we talk about the GMO, the modern genetic modifications, and also the conventional plant breeding, so the main difference is the matter of time. When we talk about the conventional plant breeding, so the beneficial traits, actually the traits is just expressions of gene. So the gene that is being incorporated into the plants is occur by chance or lucky. So it will take generation years by years, 10 years, maybe 100 years to get a result like this on my right hand side, the eggplant. So on the other hand, if we use the modern genetic engineering technique, so this technique is precisely, as I explained earlier, the definition of the genetic engineering is precisely, so we can just insert the gene of what we want. The gene, we already know the identity of the gene, so we can precisely know what is the expected result of the gene, and we can use the expected plant that we want. So this is the advantage of the GMO, the genetic modifications, modern GM technique.
Interesting. So I'm also curious, like, how did they derive the idea, of changing, let's say, eggplant from the left to the right? So, like, what came about, them crossbreeding it? Is there like a specific trigger in history, or did it occur in random? Then they start trying and error, and what sort of benefits actually does it give to the plant? In terms of having such like what we say GMO or crossbreeding.
Yeah. When we talk about a human, why human did the things like this? When we talk about humanity, we will always want to be a better. We want better things. We want a better world, and also the food that we eat. We also want to have a better food with a good quality, a good nutritional value. So that's why people are crossing the plants since few decades before until now. We come out with the genetic modifications technique here. So here are the reasons that trigger the people to have the idea like this. For one, we want to nourish the growing population of the world. So the food insecurity in the world is actually a main problem that trigger the development of the GMO. We will talk about the genetic, the advantage later. So basically the way of how GMOs is produced is actually by such a way, the insert of deletion of the gene. So let's say we have an illustration here. So let's say if you have a tomato here, we have a tomato here, and then we want to have a gene. This is the gene that we want, a beneficial trait. Let's say this a gene, the gene is derived from the bacteria, and the bacteria contain a protein that can kill the insect, that can kill the pest and insect. So scientists will extract the toxin, the toxin protein gene from the bacteria, and then we'll insert into the tomato. And the result is the tomato that we generate is toxin to the insect, and therefore they will prevent the destructions by the insect, the insect, and then reduce the use of the insecticide, the pesticides. So this is the expected result of the GMOs. So this is one of the reasons of why we do the GMO in the world, to introduce this kind of technique. So back to the questions, the advantages, or we say the benefits. So when we talk about the benefits, we will actually most probably know the reasons that trigger the idea of people about this GMO. So GMOs are produced to translate into a product with a lower price and greater benefit. So why do we say so, a lower price? So when we talk about a GMOs food, we will think on the agriculture side, with the food, the crops that we eat every day. So when we use the modern genetic engineering technique, so the plants or the crops that we grow will actually yield the beneficial traits that we expected to be used. So therefore, we will not to spend more time in crossing between species, crossing between plants, and wait for years and years to get the expected generations with the expected beneficial trait that you want. So this the modern genetic modifications is more precise. It's more precise and targeted. You will get what you want when you insert the gene that you want. So this you get a lower price. You will not waste so much time on it, and also the price that you bond on the ingredients that you want to use the fruits, and also greater benefit. So let's say the example here, we can use the GMO, the genetic engineering technique, to use a pest resistance fruits, and also herbicide tolerance plant, and also a virus resistant papaya. This example in the papaya, the Hawaiian papaya, that can resist to the rain spot virus, just like what we do in the human now, the vaccinations. when we get vaccinated, so we will be we will have a stronger immune system against the COVID-19 virus. So same do the fruits, papaya. So when we kind of like genetic modify, insert a viral protein into the papaya, it's like a vaccination to the papaya, and the papaya will be resist to the virus infections. So this kind of the genetic modifications done to the fruit, and also crops fortifications. Example here is the golden rice. We have the rice supplemented with sufficient amount of the vitamin A, so we can help to relieve, or we can reduce the case of the blindness, the vision problem, the health concerns, the vision concerns problem in the child. So these are few examples that GMOs can produce the benefit for the world. So that's why people are keen on GMO technique to reduce the suffering from people and to create a better world from this technique. So these are all the benefits that I can talk.
Then again, since there's so many benefits, we talk about genetically modified organisms, that produces food. And we all know in genetics, mutation will occur at any point of time. As you mentioned, genetic engineering probably speeds up the mutation process and, create the more ideal species. So what about the current GMO, maybe plants or organisms actually mutated into something more powerful that might possess a certain harm? Is that possible to occur?
Yeah, there is nothing perfect in the world, I can say. When you have a potential benefit on one side, there must be some drawback on the other side. So for some of the cons of the GMOs, one of the cons, the drawback of the GMO is the mutations, just like what John said just now, the mutations. So the DNA they inserted in a particular plant, the DNA is not belong to the plant. The DNA is from the other species. So when the DNA is inserted into the plant, so we are not sure about whether the plant can actually take in the DNA inside its own genome, and then will be perform well and perform normally in that particular fruits. And therefore, we can't actually sure about the risk of the GMOs in long term. Actually, until now, there is no problems, health concerns problems have been reported about the GMOs that cause a certain cancer or certain death in people. But we do not know whether the continued work, the continued progress of the GMO will cause any risk to the humankind. We don't know. There's still a progress to be discovered. So this is the risk of the GMOs that we not yet to know. And also the second one is the ethical concerns regarding the GMOs. So the ethical concerns here is the main problem that trigger the argument from the GMO activists. So the ethical problems here is that say that the nature is nature. The nature is pure. The nature is pristine. So we shouldn't pollute the nature with what we want expect to be. We are not God. We cannot play the life. We cannot play the nature that is created by God. So this is the main ethical concerns about the GMO. However, when we talk about the GMO, we develop the GMOs is actually for the sake of human. We want to make good use of it and then make benefits for the humans. And so it actually depends on the opinions of the GMOs, whether it is a good thing, whether it is a bad thing. It largely depends on the people that develop the GMOs. Okay, so the other drawbacks here is the cross-pollinations could lead to the super weeds. So here there is an interesting story here. Okay, GMOs may create a super weeds. For example, as I explained the benefit of the GMOs, one of the benefits is we will have a herbicide tolerance herbicide-tolerant plants. So when this plant is planted together with the native species, which is not GMO, so the GM genes maybe got transferred into the native species. So
how does that happen? Because of is it cross-pollination?
Yeah, cross-pollination. So cross-pollination within the same species. So when you have a GMO tomato that grows together with a non-GMO tomato, so they are same species, so they can cross-pollinate. Cross-pollinations. So this will lead to the gene flow from the GMO to the non-GMO, and therefore using the same concept. So the gene flow, the herbicide tolerance gene, will also be transferred into the soil, and also the super weeds, the weeds that grows around the tomato plants. So therefore, in a long time, as time goes by, so the weeds will become a super weeds that also having a herbicide tolerance property, and it is very a great problem for us in the future is if we want to destroy this kind of super weeds with a more stronger antibiotics or pesticide, herbicide. So this is one of the drawbacks of it, and also it will limit the biodiversity, increase competitions with the native species, and also will cause the extinction of the native species due to the natural selections, and also GMO labels are often missing and misleading. So later we will talk about the regulations of this kind of label, and also the allergic reactions. So GMOs that can contain the gene from the allergic foods like the nuts, the milk, and egg. So they will also trigger the allergic reactions in humans. So these are all the drawbacks about the GMOs.
Very interesting. So we have a few questions coming up from our comments, so we'll address them in this session. I think when you mentioned about the cons, we are talking about GMO foods. So is there any studies or evidence that suggests that there might be potential harm? Just now, in the first point itself, you mentioned we may be underestimating the risk. Mm-hmm. We may be solely looking at the benefit without, probably looking at the risk. And now, as we read in the news, there are time there are motions that drives non-GMO that mm-hmm. sort of bring opposition to GMO foods. So, is there any effect of GMO foods on human body thus far? Any known side effects?
The known side effect is the allergic problem. The first one, as I mentioned, the allergic may come from the allergic foods, the gene from the allergic foods. And also the other one is that the bacteria genes. For example, we have a GMO foods, they have a bacteria gene. However, the bacteria is not exist in our human body naturally. It's not naturally exist in our human body, the kind of gene. Okay. So we are not sure about whether this kind of gene will cause allergic reactions in the future. So these are all the uncertainty about the GMO with a new DNA inserted into that particular plants. So we are uncertain about whether the gene will cause the risk, the health risk to that person. So
probably our listeners would be also curious to say, how would us being allergic towards genes, how does that occur?
Oh, you mean?
So like how allergic reaction is triggered by DNA, as we commonly understand, study from science, genetics allergic are usually triggered by proteins instead.
Yeah, yes. So Okay, so the gene is allergy, as mentioned. The allergy is triggered by the protein. So the protein is actually the products of the DNA gene. So they are more to be discovered. Whether until now we actually have discovered just a limited number of proteins that can cause an allergy, but there are more that we don't know in the world. Maybe some of the gene from a bacteria, some of the gene from the other virus can also cause the allergy to the humans. But we don't know. But we still have to need the GMO to insert with this kind of the gene, the viral gene and the bacterial gene, to make a benefit for the humans. So in the long run, in the long term, so we can't very sure about if it will cause allergic reactions in the future or not. So these are all the things, uncertainty about the GMOs developments until now.
Yeah, I think there's another question from Holly about GMO food impact on environment. I think you just now briefly mentioned the biodiversity, because certain GMO foods are planted in plantations that might be possessing other species.
Yeah. Yes.
It might compete with certain native species. If let's say I would say the seeds of the fruits being dispersed into the wild, that might be causing a problem. I think cross-pollination, there's a chance that this DNA fragments being transferred to any local weeds, native weeds, that will cause them to mutate and sort of adopt it into superweed, which in turns is very hard for us to eliminate or control if it happens. I remember, there's a news, on superweed not too long ago, I think last year or the year before. We are having tough time, controlling the weeds. Yeah, I think an environment, nonetheless, GMO, regardless is it foods or animals, it poses equal environmental risk as well. Am I right, Lester?
Yeah. Yes. So I also saw the questions on Holly. So they do have some effect on the biodiversity, as mentioned just now, and also there's may disrupt the ecosystem since they are maybe toxin to the pest. So for example, the GMO, they contain the GM, the genetic modified toxins from the bacteria into the plants. So the plant will provide will produce toxin, and then will prevent the invasions of the insect, the invasions of the pests. But however, when humans consume that kind of GMO foods, so the gene will not be the proteins, or we say the proteins, the toxin will not be cause any adverse effect to humans. So for example, a chocolate is harmful to a dog, but it's not harmful to humans. So same goes to the GM food here. So the GM food, the pesticide resistant food is resistant to the pesticide. It's toxic to the pest, but it's not toxic to the human. So it is sometimes safe to use, and it's not actually causing some adverse effect to the humans. It is contain the toxin proteins. Okay.
Just now you did mention that you're going to share on certain labels. I think probably will be helpful for our listeners here. So what are the labels that we look for, in terms of GMO foods?
So here I'm going to show you about the regulations or the labeling in Malaysia about the GMO foods. Actually, until now, there are actually 2 GMO foods. Actually, there are ex-GMO foods that is being approved in the Malaysia. And the main 2 GMO foods that have been approved in Malaysia is the soybean and also the corn. And both of them are herbicide tolerant, or we say this resistant to herbicide. You can spray whatever any herbicide to the plant, they won't die. So this kind of thing will help the plants to resist more to the herbicides and live longer and produce more yield.
Wouldn't it be bad that way? Let's say, they just hantam all the herbicides, and when they harvest, then we actually sees it as normal. Just now you mentioned, although it's not harmful, but isn't it a potential harm that way?
Yeah, that's it. There is a potential harm that way. So this is a drawback of one of the GMO here, both of the GMO here. Yeah. So okay, there is a conspiracy that suggests that this kind of GMO, the person or the company that create this GMO, they actually put some commercial incentive or commercial profit for the herbicide company. So most of the farmer will buy more and more herbicide from the company to kill all the super weeds, since their plants, the corns and the soil is herbicide tolerant. So they will spray whatever they want to kill all the super weeds. So this kind of thing is like a commercial profit for the herbicide company, but they are still harmful effect to the human health. So I saw an article just published 2 days later say that overexposure to the insecticides will actually increase your susceptibility to the COVID-19. So okay, so this is a very simple mindset. So when you expose to more and more the insecticides, the chemical will actually reduce your immune cells, the affinity of your immune cells to that viral particle. So therefore, when your immune system is weakened, so the COVID-19 susceptibility will be increased. So this is the normal concept. So here are 2 the GMO plants that are approved in Malaysia, and these are the label. So the most important part of the GMO regulation in Malaysia is that when the foods contain more than 3% of the GMO contents or the GMO genes, so there must be a label on that food. So here are the 2 examples of the label. So we have a corn here, meaning that genetically modified is a GM corn. Okay, so the other is the sample label packed by the PQR, the company name, but you have to mention a genetically modified. And also the soybean here, mention genetic modified, and also the source of the gene. You have to mention the source of the gene. As I mentioned, one of the drawback is the GMO may trigger the allergic reactions in the human, and therefore, to prevent the allergic reactions, the company must actually mention the gene source that they contain in the GM foods. For example, this is the gene derived from the cow, and maybe this is the gene derived from the nut, derived from the milk. So the persons they allergic to this kind of stuff have to avoid of purchasing this kind of thing. So these are the label here. We can have a look on it. Okay.
That's right. So I think for those who are concerned about GMO foods, or I think to an extent, right, certain foods, even we know, like for example meat, there were issues of adulterant meat as well. So just to share, in terms of testing, DNA testing, there is already solutions in the lab for us to test whether or not that particular food source is GMO using a very common PCR technique. So for those who are concerned, those who are interested, you can PM us to understand more. So if you want, right now it's not in the regulation, am I right, to test for foods in terms of GMO?
I'm not sure about it, but I will search on it and get back to you.
Yeah, I think because the testing ability is there, but I don't think the regulation is actually enforcing any GMO testing right now. It's more on for in-kind certification testing. But then again, I think GMO foods poses pros and cons. Of course, it solves some issues on food insecurity and food supplies. In the same time, as you mentioned earlier, it may be underestimating some of the potential downside in the future, and also undermining its effect on the environment. So as I understand, in terms of breeding as well, like fish breeding, sometimes when you introduce a new gene pool of fish or genetically enhanced fish species into the river or what, there might be fishes or small fishes, fries that escape the the vicinity, the farm, and actually crossbreed into a local breed, and creating a more resistant or more powerful species. So this kind of thing is, it doesn't come back to us until it happens. A lot of, I think, environmentalists and biologists are sort of warning us about it. But now, I mean, a lot of people don't really see that hitting them as hard right now. So earlier on, Lester asked me, so what's my take on GMO food? So honestly speaking, from a very realistic standpoint, as you showed just now, in terms of the corn, of course, I wouldn't want to eat the ancestor corn. I would still probably prefer the GMO corn. So I think in terms of realistic manner, I still would go for the usual corn. Although, some of us might not see a huge difference. We have been eating that corn for quite some while. Even tomatoes or the brinjal, lady's finger, I presume, banana even. How can we avoid eating that? But then again, we would need to be, I think, more careful in terms of managing the technology, and I think bringing an awareness overall in terms of the consumer on GMO food is required. Although some researchers or some regulators, they say it's safe, it's safe to consume. Yeah, probably it's safe to consume. We have been consuming for the past maybe 20 or 30 years in terms of those fruits, but in terms of the impact to the ecosystem, we are not able to measure as yet. So I think my take is more proceed with caution. Once you mention, if the species is herbicide resistant, we might be eating a lot more herbicides than we expected. We don't know about that. Yeah, but then again, food safety is a huge topic to discuss, and probably we are not at the right position to discuss that. So I think one call again to our listeners here, to recap, today is the episode 12 of Health Huddle. We are talking about GMO foods, the DNA of what you and I eat on. So there are surprising facts, a very interesting topic that we are discussing today. Any one of you has any further questions, please do leave a comment. So I think the following question that probably I would be interested to know is, what other maybe GMO foods other than maybe the vegetables, the things that you mentioned. Is there any examples on maybe meat products?
Yeah, there are actually some meat products. For example, a muscular pig or muscular animal. So people will actually genetic modify the animal to have more muscular, to provide more meat to meet the demand for the market, the food market, and also the growing salmon, a fast growing salmon. So so these are all the demands that people want to use, and also the featherless chicken. So
featherless chicken.
Yeah, there is a GMO organism chicken here, featherless chickens. Used to save times of the restaurant to withdraw all the feathers from the chickens. But actually, at the same time, the chicken itself is more prone to the environmental stress because it's less of the feathers. So the chicken will be more prone to the disease when it don't have any feather to protect it, to protect the chicken itself. So these are drawbacks of the GMOs, and also the zebra fish. There's some of the animal in the oceans, the oceans animal, they will emit the fluorescence fish. So this kind of things is actually want to detect the pollutions. The fish will actually fluorescence when it detect any kind of pollution. So this will help the Oceans Regulations Agency to actually know the level of the pollutions in a particular area of the oceans. So these are all the things that people do in the animals to actually help to do benefit for people, to humans, and also help to reduce human suffering, and also do good to the environment to create a better world.
Then would you say like different breeds of dogs is considered a GMO?
Pardon?
Different breeds of dogs.
Different breeds of dogs.
Yeah, like different. If you see, canine species is very diverse in terms of we have from one end very huge, maybe like German Shepherd sort of golden retriever sort of dog. Then there's another end is like Chihuahua, and sometimes within dogs they sort of crossbreed. like Pomeranian, probably you breed with, let's say, a Shiba, probably you get like a Shiba-Ranian or something like that. So is that considered like a GMO? So what? So what's that about? Yeah.
The kind of things is actually the dogs itself is actually not considered as a GMO.
Oh, why so? Okay.
Why so? So the GMO. So when we call an animal as a GMO, it normally contain a gene that is purposely or artificially or intentionally inserted into that dog. So the breeders that breed the dogs between two kinds of species is a kind of a hybridization process. So this hybridization process is a process occurred by lucky or occurred by chance. So maybe the dogs, the offspring between a Shiba and Husky, the offspring of the dogs may more likely to the Husky, but actually the process that occur within the complex biological system of that dog is actually not considered artificial genetic engineering technique. So therefore, it's not considered as an GMO, but actually is a natural hybrid. A natural hybrid of that two species of dog is a natural hybrid.
I see. Okay, that solves a huge question mark from me. Okay, I think there's no more questions from our audience here. Then I think we are just about wrapping up our session today. So thank you, Lester. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I think we had a good run of Health Huddle episode 12. So we have been doing this consistently almost every week. And I think we're going to wrap up today. It was quite informative. Thank you very much, Lester.
Thank you, John.
Hope our listeners also got some insight, learned something about GMO foods and also the DNA around it. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again in the next episode of Health Huddle.
Thank you very much. Everyone.
Cheers and good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I took my vaccine in 9 in the morning. Then I'm not a person that take afternoon nap. But then that particular afternoon, I took a nap.